Walmart made billions of dollars this year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariff.
Walmart just did something no one expected. They called America's bluff. When stores in San Diego and Illinois shut down overnight, it wasn't retail strategy. It was retreat, not from competition, from policy. Tariffs didn't just make prices spike. They broke the math that held the economy together. Tariffs turned profit margins into quicksand. Automation wasn't a choice, it was a lifeline. And the fallout? Just beginning. Walmart didn't just respond. They adapted, evolved, and redefined the playbook. What they saw coming should terrify every other business and every American families. Stick around, because this wasn't just about Walmart. It was about the hidden cost of survival in a collapsing system. And trust me, this is no good news for us. The day prices turned on the middle class. Your retirement savings, they just became a bargaining chip. When President Donald Trump reinstated sweeping tariffs against Chinese goods, the economic fallout was swift and ruthless. A 145% import duty on key categories caught even seasoned traders off guard, eventually stabilizing at a modest 30%, but the damage was already done. CFO John David Rainey delivered the first blow. He warned that starting in June, consumers would see noticeable price hikes. By July, he added, they'd feel the sting in full, right in the heart of back-to-school season. A Barbie doll that sold for $10.49 one week now carried a $14.99 price tag the next. And that was just the beginning. Staples like bananas, avocados, diapers, and formula were no longer immune. For a retailer that built its empire on the slogan, "Everyday low prices," this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an identity crisis. When Walmart raised prices, the industry noticed. When Walmart raised prices and blamed tariffs, the nation panicked. Parents, already juggling inflation and rising rent, saw their weekly grocery budgets implode. It wasn't about avocados anymore, it was about survival. President Trump took to social media, insisting Walmart should absorb the tariff costs. But any economist could explain, tariffs are taxes. They don't disappear just because a retailer is big. And when Walmart can't shield its customers, the shockwaves reach every aisle of American life. Now, pricing was only phase one. The real transformation had already begun, far from the cash registers. Where loyalty ends, sourcing abroad. What if the biggest threat wasn't foreign competition, but domestic betrayal? While sticker shock was making headlines, something even more consequential was happening behind Walmart's loading docks. A quiet exodus of manufacturing orders was underway. Walmart didn't just raise prices, it redrew its sourcing map. Orders that once went to American-based suppliers were rerouted to partners in Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Packaging was re-engineered. Fiberglass replaced aluminum to dodge import duties. Labels began shifting from Made in USA to generic foreign origins. The company quietly shelved its patriotic Made in America initiatives and launched a new supply-side doctrine, Grow With Us. It didn't promise to grow with America. It promised to grow with whoever could survive tariffs. For small manufacturers in Arkansas, Ohio, and Pennsylvania who'd built their livelihoods on Walmart contracts, the silence was devastating. No explanation, just the fading sound of opportunity being offshored. The betrayal stung, not because companies had to adapt, but because Walmart had long claimed it would never abandon its American backbone. Suddenly, loyalty had a new definition. Whatever could survive a 30% duty. But even these strategic shifts wouldn't be enough. Walmart needed one more ace to keep its empire afloat, and that card would spark a political firestorm. Automation or abandonment? How does an industry giant fall? One decision at a time. As Walmart faced exploding costs and political pressure, executives made a daring pivot: automation. In-store robots began stocking shelves and mopping floors. Self-checkout lanes multiplied. Behind the scenes, artificial intelligence tools replaced human order planners. From the outside, it looked like innovation. On the inside, it was desperation. Labor unions were furious. Conservative lawmakers branded the move unpatriotic. Even liberal critics warned of job losses in already strained communities. And all the while, Walmart executives doubled down. Their logic was chilling in its simplicity. Automation doesn't pay tariffs. Machines don't take sick days. Algorithms don't strike. For cashiers in Tennessee and warehouse workers in Nebraska, the message was clear: adapt or vanish. Towns that relied on Walmart not just for shopping but for employment suddenly faced a new threat: not closure, not inflation, displacement. What began as a cost cost-saving measure turned into a cultural fracture. The brand that once stood for rural resilience now symbolized mechanical coldness. And when the president found out what was happening, he didn't just fire off tweets, he prepared to fire back, hard. Look, we pulled insights from over 30 policy documents and internal logistics briefings. You're now ahead of the curve on America's most radical supply chain overhaul. If this helped you connect the dots, give us a like and subscribe. It fuels what we do next. The math that broke distribution. The consequences would ripple across continents. Walmart's sprawling network of distribution centers had been perfected over decades, built for maximum efficiency and razor-thin margins. From Elk Grove, California, to Bentonville, Arkansas, these facilities represented the silent backbone of the world's most powerful retailer. But with President Trump's new tariffs, that backbone snapped. Transportation costs ballooned overnight. Inbound shipping invoices from Asia exploded in price. For the first time, the math simply didn't work. Inside Walmart headquarters, finance teams scrambled to recalculate. Margins weren't just squeezed, they were crushed. Every inbound container meant a loss. The finely tuned choreography of cross-docking and just-in-time inventory management turned into chaos. Even adjusting outbound delivery fees and rerouting regional fulfillment didn't help. By the end of the first emergency modeling session, a grim truth emerged. Certain centers were bleeding money. The decision to shut down wasn't symbolic, it was mathematical. Facilities in key heartland states were suspended indefinitely. Walmart, the company that promised to be everywhere, was now vanishing in places where it mattered most. But it wasn't just the numbers breaking down, it was the lives behind the boxes that would carry the weight. Communities in the crossfire. This wasn't just a retail closure, it was a mass layoff with a barcode. Walmart had always been more than a store in many towns. It was the largest employer, the source of community sponsorships, and the reason small towns still had steady incomes. When facilities closed in the Midwest and South, the economic shock was immediate. Forklift operators, cafeteria staff, janitors, truck drivers, tens of thousands found themselves adrift. There was no notice, just a sudden stop in scheduling systems. Small trucking firms reliant on Walmart's routes saw contracts vanish. Local packaging suppliers received cancellations with no explanation. The quiet hum of small-town America fell silent. Mayors called emergency town hall meetings. State employment agencies were flooded with unemployment claims. In places like Jefferson City and Bowling Green, pastors and barbershops became makeshift support centers. The emotional toll was profound. Walmart had long promised stability, not disruption. Generations of families who had worked the same facility floors now faced a future without even a fallback plan. But while America grieved, Walmart's competitors abroad were celebrating. The trade war wasn't just hurting the US, it was realigning the global retail map. The allies who hit back. What happens when allies become adversaries? In response to the United States' new tariff regime, global partners retaliated. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico imposed counter duties on American exports. The message was clear. If Washington wanted a trade war, it wouldn't be one-sided. Walmart found itself caught in the crossfire. European apparel suppliers raised costs. Canadian logistics partners increased handling fees. Even Mexico, once a safe haven for nearshoring, added friction to shipments. Meanwhile, Southeast Asia seized its moment. Nations like Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia offered tax incentives, expedited customs clearances, and access to infrastructure grants. Walmart executives fast-tracked contracts with new suppliers in these regions. Visa offices in Manila and Ho Chi Minh City were flooded with Walmart procurement reps. New corridors were mapped to bypass West Coast ports altogether, heading through the Panama Canal or Gulf shipping lanes. Washington, once the hub of Walmart's trade compliance discussions, found itself sidelined. Policy volatility had driven America's biggest retailer to look for partners who understood stability. And just as new trade routes were being drawn, a war was erupting inside the very halls of government that started it all. Power at the podium, weakness in the warehouse. Washington roared, but Main Street trembled. President Trump, angered by Walmart's public defiance and overseas pivot, lashed out on Truth Social. Unpatriotic, weak, should pay the tariffs like real Americans, he wrote. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick backed him up in a televised address, insisting that corporate giants had a duty to absorb trade shocks to preserve American competitiveness. But economists called their bluff. Tariffs are taxes, and someone always pays. In backdoor meetings, Treasury officials tried to convince Walmart to wait out the tariff cycle. Company executives responded with charts, forecasts, and a single answer: we cannot afford to. Simultaneously, members of Congress grilled Walmart executives in hearings. Was this a betrayal of American workers or a survival strategy born of necessity? Doug McMillon maintained his calm. He wasn't saving profits. He was saving Walmart itself. Still, the spectacle was bruising. Public trust in Walmart plummeted. Shareholders grew anxious. Even loyal customers began questioning their weekly trips. And inside Walmart's inner circle, a decision was forming. One that would redefine the very nature of retail operations in America. The new global map. They weren't just rerouting products. They were redrawing the world. Walmart's top strategists mapped out an entirely new global sourcing blueprint. China was no longer viable as the dominant supplier. Tariffs had made it too expensive, too risky, too volatile. In its place, Walmart invested heavily in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even emerging African ports. Governments in Vietnam and Colombia offered deep incentives, tax holidays, expedited customs clearance, and infrastructure support. Walmart seized the opportunity. Agreements with manufacturers in the Rust Belt and rural South tried to preserve a domestic footprint, but hurdles were immense. Aging infrastructure, lack of automation, and rising insurance costs slowed development. Still, Walmart hoped to secure its America First credibility with at least a portion of inventory. Global alliances moved faster. By mid-year, Walmart had signed logistics pacts with Vietnamese ports, secured regional production in Indonesia, and established new trade lanes through the Gulf. The new map didn't look like recovery. It looked like reinvention. Walmart's buyers underwent rapid retraining. They learned to navigate multilingual supplier databases, regional labor law frameworks, and currency instability. In Colombia, Walmart backed the construction of a new inland port to streamline agricultural exports. In Kenya, it tested solar-powered shipping consolidation hubs to meet ESG goals while reducing freight costs. It was no longer just about sourcing. It was about geopolitics, where Walmart placed its orders now had the power to shift local economies, tilt trade balances, and even influence diplomatic postures. But even the best-laid maps can't predict policy storms. Walmart needed something smarter, something predictive. Artificial intelligence meets real-world crisis. Can code replace certainty? Walmart's engineers thought it could. A task force was launched to develop a new predictive analytics platform. The goal: anticipate tariff changes, reroute product flows in real time, and manage risk at the speed of diplomacy. Powered by machine learning and natural language processing, the system scoured speeches, government briefings, and global shipping logs. When an official hinted at a new duty or regulatory adjustment, the platform would flag it. Merchandising teams received live alerts. Stocking plans adjusted within hours. Inventory could be rerouted from high-risk ports to alternative hubs, minimizing landed costs. The AI proved effective during a summer flash tariff announcement. Walmart avoided a potential $14 million fee spike by shifting supply orders within 48 hours. Suddenly, the company wasn't reacting to politics. It was outmaneuvering it. Engineers layered on modules that could track port congestion, global fuel prices, and even regional weather patterns. This gave Walmart a strategic edge. During a typhoon that disrupted shipments from Manila, the platform shifted loads to Jakarta without losing a day of delivery. The system began learning correlations. It predicted stockpile behavior from rival firms, identified commodities likely to face scrutiny, and flagged unstable shipping lanes. The more data it absorbed, the more accurate it became. The trade war had forced Walmart into technological territory it had never fully explored. And now every retailer was watching, but software alone wouldn't fix public perception or legislative backlash. For that, Walmart had to step into the spotlight. Reputation management or strategic warfare. Walmart went on offense, not in pricing, but in perception. Executives appeared in congressional hearings, emphasizing the impossible position tariffs had placed them in. Op-eds flooded major newspapers. A coordinated campaign of town halls and virtual consumer forums reshaped the conversation. Walmart was no longer hiding. It was pleading its case to America, and the strategy worked. Consumers began to see the story behind the sticker shock. Parents frustrated by school supply costs heard directly from Walmart planners about inventory shortages and international bottlenecks. In digital loyalty apps, the company rolled out special points multipliers for American-made goods. It wasn't a full reversal, but it was symbolic. It showed Walmart was listening. Union leaders and community organizers were brought in to co-author internal policy reforms. Suddenly, the retailer most known for undercutting prices was being hailed as a reluctant but willing reformer. The company launched a tariff transparency website, explaining in simple language how pricing was impacted. Weekly blog posts shared behind-the-scenes stories of workers navigating global sourcing shifts. Public sentiment began to swing. Partnerships with universities led to research grants studying the long-term effects of tariff volatility. Walmart branded itself as the thought leader in retail resilience. Even skeptical policymakers began to reconsider their positions. Yet the most radical transformation wasn't external. It was unfolding within the very culture of the company. The internal earthquake. Walmart's greatest transformation wasn't external, it was cultural. Forced to evolve under pressure, the company abandoned rigid hierarchies and created cross-functional war rooms. Nightly video calls became standard. Associates from merchandising, logistics, and data analytics collaborated across time zones. Floor-level employees in Kansas brainstormed with executives in New York. Innovation surged. Skunkworks teams prototyped micro-warehouses, pop-up stores, and regional fulfillment lockers. Some distribution floors were converted into co-working spaces for domestic producers. Training programs were revamped. Walmart offered tuition assistance for automation, data science, and logistics certifications. Layoffs were paired with upskilling pathways. The move shocked labor unions. For the first time, Walmart wasn't just acknowledging disruption, it was investing in resilience. Walmart's internal culture, once known for scale and replication, now thrived on speed, experimentation, and risk. It was messy, it was unpredictable, but it was alive. Departments once siloed were now co-located physically and digitally. Decision-making timelines shrank from months to days. Store-level managers were given direct feedback channels to corporate, bypassing bureaucracy. Employee-led innovation councils were funded. Proposals for local sourcing, sustainability, and AI integrations flowed directly to board-level review. Ideas that once died in middle management now became pilot programs in under 60 days. In Arkansas, a laid-off forklift driver pitched a rehire program through community colleges. The idea was funded within a week and adopted across 3 states. And outside its walls, the next battleground had already begun, one that would redefine the economics of global retail itself. Global recalibration. Can the world's biggest store still lead if the map keeps shifting? Across the Pacific and Atlantic, the global trade landscape had transformed. Walmart's distribution pause wasn't just an internal crisis, it became international leverage. The European Commission, once defensive, now found strength in Walmart's withdrawal. Trade ministers in Ottawa and Tokyo lobbied U.S. officials with new urgency. Their message was blunt: recalibrate or risk rupture. Governments that had been wary of Walmart's scale now saw opportunity. Southeast Asian nations like Vietnam and Thailand rushed to fill the vacuum, offering expedited customs processes, land grants, and labor guarantees. Indonesia streamlined warehousing permits. Brazil offered bilateral trade benefits in exchange for sourcing guarantees. The ripple was felt in surprising places. Sub-Saharan African economies pitched textile hubs. Middle Eastern ports bid to become Walmart's re-export gateway into Europe. Suddenly, the brand that had once dominated on American soil was redrawing the boundaries of its global reach. And in Washington, lawmakers were alarmed. Walmart wasn't just working around tariffs, it was rebuilding global retail architecture. Congress mulled restrictions. The Treasury eyed enforcement mechanisms. But every action risked worsening inflation and alienating allies. And just as geopolitical alliances shifted, financial markets reacted with their own fury. The financial shockwave. When Walmart stumbles, markets fall. As news of the shutdowns and supply shifts spread, retail sector indices took a hit. Hedge funds holding long positions in freight volumes and inventory flows scrambled to adjust. Port authorities in Los Angeles and Houston revised throughput forecasts downward. Rail operators flagged projected deficits. Payment processors downgraded revenue forecasts. Walmart's partners across sectors, from Procter & Gamble to Hasbro, watched order volumes tighten Insurance underwriters flagged claims risk tied to supply chain delays, and logistics firms with dependency on Walmart lanes found themselves exposed. Walmart's debt outlook was revised. Credit agencies placed its supply chain-backed instruments under watch. Institutional investors reviewed their stake allocations. It wasn't panic, it was recalibration. The world had realized if Walmart was no longer a constant, neither was the U.S. consumer economy. Market behavior also revealed a harsh truth. Automation was stabilizing margins, but not trust. AI-based efficiencies reassured shareholders only temporarily. Long-term outlooks still hinged on labor recovery, retail volume return, and predictable trade conditions, none of which were guaranteed. But amid all this chaos, an unexpected transformation was quietly gaining traction, one that would redefine Walmart's brand image completely: the sustainability pivot. A crisis built for survival turned into a revolution in sustainability. With its global supply chain shattered, Walmart seized the moment to realign its environmental goals. Rail routes to regional hubs were electrified. Diesel-powered trucks were replaced with electric and hydrogen fleets. Solar and wind energy providers signed new power agreements with Walmart. Warehouses near Dallas and Phoenix added on-site battery storage to buffer energy costs and stabilize peak usage. Microgrid integration made isolated fulfillment centers more resilient. Freight consolidation centers were redesigned to optimize weight distribution and reduce excess load trips. Packaging was radically simplified. No more layered plastic shells. Recyclable, biodegradable materials became standard. Walmart issued its first sustainability-linked bond, tying corporate loan costs to decarbonization benchmarks. Institutional investors responded positively. ESG funds reclassified Walmart from exposed risk to agile innovator. Carbon tracking went digital. Consumers received receipts with climate impact scores. Mobile apps let buyers compare the carbon footprint of a product from multiple countries. The pivot did more than save costs. It created a future-facing Walmart. No longer just the low-price leader, the company was positioning itself as the most sustainable global retailer. But green initiatives alone weren't enough. If Walmart wanted to weather the next policy storm, it needed a logistics system built not for size, but for flexibility. The new supply chain blueprint. What if Walmart's shutdown wasn't a failure, but a masterclass? Inside logistics war rooms and remote innovation labs, blueprints emerged not for recovery, but for reinvention. The company realized that resilience would no longer be a bonus feature of supply chains. It would be the price of entry. So Walmart discarded the very model that made it a juggernaut. Gone were the massive monolithic distribution centers designed for scale but not speed. In their place, a sprawling mesh of micro-fulfillment hubs, interlinked through a network of high-speed regional nodes optimized for dynamic rerouting and shock absorption. Urban pickup lockers were no longer mere conveniences. They became the outer limbs of a flexible distribution organism. These linked directly to mid-size restocking stations, hidden in industrial parks and near dense residential corridors. Meanwhile, rural zones, traditionally underserved, received electrified mobile hubs, self-contained modular units that moved weekly to wherever demand shifted. Each node communicated with the next in real time through predictive AI, which evaluated weather patterns, traffic disruptions, labor shortages, and political unrest to adjust inventory and transit decisions by the minute. Inside the system, inventory buffers behaved more like floating assets than fixed stockpiles. Algorithms forecasted spikes in demand and rerouted shipments days before the average analyst would flag a trend. The shift was from reaction to prediction, from rigidity to modularity. Walmart no longer had a supply chain. It had a supply web, adaptive, responsive, and self-healing. Internationally, the strategy upended decades of globalization. Offshoring was no longer a strength. The new doctrine was nearshoring and friendshoring. Rather than relying on supply from halfway around the world, Walmart prioritized sourcing from politically aligned, trade-secure regions. Central America emerged as a critical zone, with Guatemala and Honduras becoming key textile and produce partners. U.S.-Mexico border zones were transformed into binational logistics corridors, blending low-cost manufacturing with just-in-time delivery capabilities. The economics weren't perfect. Costs rose slightly in the short term, but so did resilience. Delays no longer brought operations to a standstill. And perhaps more importantly, the geopolitical exposure was reduced. Walmart could now withstand trade disruptions without begging for policy exemptions or lobbying for relief. Internal teams dubbed the model polycentric redundancy, a geeky term for a revolutionary system. If one node failed, a port blocked, a factory closed, a customs inspection escalated. The system flexed around it. Orders were rebalanced. Suppliers were pre-authorized and certified in alternate zones. Inventory loss dropped by double digits. Delivery times stabilized across 80% of service zones. Labor models diversified as well, with temporary staffing and cross-border workforce exchanges becoming normal features of regional flexibility. This system didn't just survive volatility, it forecasted it. A heat wave in Vietnam triggered an automated reroute of perishable goods to Brazil. When political unrest escalated in Taiwan, Walmart's internal network rerouted all microchip-intensive products to be sourced from Malaysia, even before major news outlets broke the story. Even warehouse design changed. New fulfillment centers were no longer built as massive boxes in remote industrial zones. Instead, they were vertical, compact, and embedded near commuter rail lines, reducing last-mile friction and enabling staff to live closer to work. Robotics handled heavy lifts, but humans managed adaptive roles, identifying anomalies, modifying routing algorithms, and interacting with community pickup nodes. What emerged was an anti-fragile model, one that improved under stress, adapted under threat, and evolved during chaos. In this system, disruption wasn't a risk, it was a catalyst. Walmart had effectively turned every future crisis into a testbed for operational innovation. The most radical insight? This wasn't just a supply chain upgrade. It was a blueprint for national resilience. If replicated at scale by grocers, medical suppliers, energy distributors, the United States could decentralize logistical risk without surrendering economic efficiency. Walmart had, perhaps unintentionally, constructed a logistics doctrine fit for the 21st century. The final question remained: would America follow Walmart's lead, or punish it for surviving where others failed? The answer would determine whether the system itself could evolve, or whether politics would once again smother innovation in favor of slogans and blame. Redefining retail power. What happens when the world's biggest store says the system doesn't work? Everyone listens. Walmart's pivot, born of pressure, fear, and necessity, had become a global referendum on economic survival. Retailers everywhere were tearing up their plans, rebuilding their networks, revisiting their ethics. Policy wonks, corporate boards, and global financiers were all studying the Walmart case. Could resilience scale? Could transparency sell? Could climate savings offset tariff exposure? The answers weren't simple, but they were unavoidable. Back in Arkansas, Walmart's board approved a permanent capital reallocation model. 1/3 for tech, 1/3 for sustainability, 1/3 for labor reskilling and supply agility. It wasn't just a business plan, it was a statement. What happens when the world's biggest retailer rewrites the rules? Is this survival or the start of something bigger? This wasn't just about Walmart, it was about all of us. If this opened your eyes, hit subscribe. Drop a comment. What do you think comes next? Thanks for watching. The next chapter is already unfolding.